Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark. I'm thrilled you're here because today we're kicking off a brand new adventure designed to turbocharge your English listening and speaking skills right from the comfort of your own home. Over the next few videos, we'll be dipping into a simple yet gripping 10-chapter story. Think missed trains, hidden agendas, and a triumphant journey home. Each chapter gives us fresh vocabulary, natural dialogue, and plenty of chances to practice speaking out loud. So grab a notebook, settle in, and let's light up your English journey together. Chapter 1. A Sleepless Vigil. I did not sleep, not for a single heartbeat of that long, restless night. Each time my lids fluttered closed, they snapped open again, chased by a fresh wave of excitement and dread that rolled over me like surf against a moonlit shore. The quiet tick of the hall clock became a drummer's cadence, beating out the seconds until dawn. I lay rigid beneath my quilt, watching shadows creep across the ceiling while the embers in the hearth sank to a faint ruby glow. Somewhere outside, an owl called once and fell silent. I counted the pause, half hoping for its answer. None came. My mind ran circles instead, around the journey, around Aunt Clara's smiling face waiting at the end of it, around every terrifying possibility in between. What if I missed the train? What if I lost the letter Father had carefully folded for her? What if I made a fool of myself the very first moment I stood on my own? When the mantel clock finally chimed 5, the note of it seemed loud enough to rattle the panes. Almost at once came the gentle knock I had been awaiting. "Emily," my father whispered through the door. "Day breaks upon us." I was already sitting upright. My stockings lay neatly folded on the chair. I had arranged them hours earlier in the vain belief that preparedness might coax sleep. I tugged them on with hands that trembled, then slipped into the simple cream-colored dress Mother had ironed the night before she left for the early shift at the infirmary. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender water. The mirror above my wash basin showed me a pale face framed by a tumble of dark hair. There were half moons under my eyes, tokens of the night's vigil, and yet a flush of anticipation warmed my cheeks. I brushed the hair back, braided it, and tied the end with Mother's blue ribbon, my touchstone whenever courage wavered. I opened the door. Father stood in the narrow corridor, lantern in hand. He had already donned his wool coat, the one patched at the elbows, and a knitted scarf wound twice about his neck. In the lamplight I saw he too looked tired, though a reassuring smile softened the worry etched beside his eyes. He raised the lantern in welcome. "Ready, little Robin?" "As I'll ever be," I answered, scarcely trusting my voice. at the kitchen table sat the small cloth-bound satchel we had packed together. One loaf of coarse bread wrapped in greaseproof paper, a flask of sweet tea, 2 crisp red apples, and Father's letter addressed to my aunt in his precise hand. He added a tiny parcel tied with twine, ginger biscuits Mother had baked for Clara, and nestled it among the provisions. Last of all, he slipped our family photograph between the folded linen napkins. I reached for a slice of bread, then drew back. My stomach knotted. "I can't," I murmured. Father nodded, unsurprised. "You may find an appetite once the wheels are turning." He blew out the kitchen lamp, lifted the satchel, and opened the front door. A breath of pre-dawn air entered, cool, carrying the scent of river mist and newly turned soil. The eastern horizon smoldered amber behind the hedgerows. We stepped onto the flagstone path. Dew glittered on every blade of grass, weighting them like tiny crystal beads. Our cottage, ivy-clad and time-worn, looked both familiar and suddenly far away, as though I were already viewing it from a distance I could not cross again so easily. We set off. The road to Rivergate Station winds 3 miles through meadows and, after the stone bridge, climbs a gentle rise bordered by oaks. Father's stride was steady. Mine was quicker in spurts, slowed by nerves in between. We said little. The dawn chorus began, first a solitary robin, then a chorus of finches, larks, and wrens until the hedges seemed alive with song. It felt, perversely, like a farewell anthem. At the bend where the fountain grass grows shoulder-high, Father spoke. "Your mother wanted to come," he said. "The night shift made it impossible, but she will rest easier knowing you're safely on the train." "I know," I replied. "Tell her I'll write the moment I arrive." "I will." He offered the faintest grin. "She'll check the post each morning at sunup until your letter comes." We passed Old Man Fletcher's orchard, saplings sprouting in neat rows beyond the dry stone wall. Only last summer I had chased butterflies there with my younger cousin. How swiftly a year could pivot life in a new direction. The station roof appeared just as the sky blushed pink. Rivergate is no grand terminus, only a single platform topped by corrugated tin, a lonely ticket booth, and a pot of geraniums tended by Mrs. Graves, the porter's wife. Steam drifted lazily from the waiting locomotive, its black iron sides slick with condensation. A solitary lamp still burned above the timetable. Father purchased my ticket and guided me toward the third carriage. Its doors stood open. Faint warmth seeped through from the coal stove inside. We stowed the satchel overhead, and he adjusted the handle so it would not slide during the journey. Then he turned to me, resting both hands on my shoulders. "Mind the change at Silverwood Junction," he said, voice low but earnest. "Keep your wits about you, and if you need help, look for the station master. Mr. Ridley wears a green waistcoat. You can't miss him." I nodded, absorbing every word. My pulse thrummed so loudly I feared he might hear it. "Be courteous but cautious," he continued. "And remember, bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's stepping forward despite it." The conductor's whistle blew a warning. Father squeezed my shoulders once more, then brushed a stray strand of hair behind my ear, an old habit from childhood. "Write to us as soon as you reach Aunt Clara." "I promise." He stepped back onto the platform. I climbed into the carriage and settled by the window. The seat cushions smelled faintly of pipe smoke and polished leather. Outside, Father lifted one hand in farewell. I pressed my palm to the cold glass. Another whistle. A jolt. Wheels turned with a metallic sigh. The platform began to slide past. Father's figure receded rapidly, blurred by gathering steam. I kept my gaze fixed until he became a speck, then vanished behind a cluster of silver birches. The countryside, unfurled. Sunlight spilled over fields stitched with hedges, painting them gold. The train clattered across the viaduct spanning calm water where swans drifted half-hidden in morning mist. In the distance, a church spire punctured the sky. Everything looked achingly beautiful, impossibly vast. Inside the carriage, only two other travelers occupied seats farther down, an elderly woman knitting a scarlet scarf and a middle-aged man poring over a ledger. Their calm industry contrasted with the storm swirling in my chest. I exhaled slowly, unclenching fists I hadn't realized were tight. A flicker of hunger reminded me of the untouched bread, but I could not yet face food. I withdrew Aunt Clara's letter, traced Father's handwriting with my finger, and tucked it back again for safekeeping. The rhythm of the rails, clack, 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 settled into something almost soothing. I allowed myself to imagine the moment of arrival. Clara's warm embrace, the smell of her rose garden, the taste of her honey cakes. Hope, bright and fragile, fluttered inside me like a skylark freed from its cage. Somewhere up ahead lay Silverwood Junction. Beyond it, bigger adventures awaited. But just then, wrapped in dawn light and motion, I sat very still, listening to the heartbeat of the train. aware that the life I had known was already slipping into memory while a new story gathered itself on the horizon. And though I had kept vigil through the darkest hours, I felt no weariness, only the vibrant hum of beginnings, as certain and unstoppable as the rising sun. Chapter 2. Across the Countryside. The train gathered speed, and the low hum beneath my boots deepened into a steady roar, an immense metal heartbeat that conquered every other sound. Fields rushed past in green and gold ribbons, stretching toward a rim of distant hills where morning mist clung like gauze. I pressed my forehead to the window pane, cool against the warmth of my breath, and let the scene unfold as if the countryside itself were turning pages in a giant picture book. First came the dairy lands, broad meadows dotted with black and white. Cattle who raised their heads in mild curiosity, tails flicking away the dawn gnats. Behind them, skeins of geese traced ragged letters across the sky, calling to one another in tones half mournful, half triumphant. A hedgerow flashed by. 5, 10, 20 heartbeats of tangled hawthorn bright with white blossom. And then we were into wheat country, every blade tipped with new sunshine so that the whole plain glittered as if sewn with coins. Inside the Y compartment, time felt suspended. The elderly lady opposite me, the one knitting the scarlet scarf, had reached the length of her forearm now. The skein of yarn bounced gently at her feet with each rhythmic pull of the needles. She did not glance up. The accountant farther down flicked a page in his ledger every few minutes, muttering sums under his breath. The carriage smelled faintly of coal smoke, leather, and the peppermint lozenges the knitter kept in a little tin. A gentle jolt announced a minor curve in the track. Somewhere ahead the whistle sang, echoing along a stand of pines. The hills drew closer, rolling like ancient shoulders beneath a patchwork cloak, moss green, heather purple, sheep white, and stone gray. A brook accompanied us for several miles, water leaping over boulders in a silver race. I imagined I could hear it over the rattle of the wheels, and for a moment the carriage seemed to float, as if carried downstream toward whatever awaited me. My thoughts wandered down many paths at once. I pictured Aunt Clara's garden, the way the rose trellis must look this very morning, dew diamonds trembling on each petal. I rehearsed what I would say when I stepped off the platform at Meadowsend, her local station. "I'm here, Auntie. I made it all by myself." Then anxiety stole in. Suppose the letter I carried slipped from my satchel? I felt for the envelope once again, fingers brushing its reassuring edges, and let out a breath. Safe. We thundered through a rock cutting, granite walls looming so close the sun vanished and the window filled with my own reflection. A pale girl with earnest eyes, lips parted at the wonder of it all. When daylight burst back, so did color. Gorse blazing yellow along the embankment, skylarks spiraling overhead, their cascading notes lost to the wind. A porter slid the compartment door aside. His brass buttons winked as he tipped his cap. "Tickets, please." The knitter produced hers with practiced efficiency. The accountant stuffed his ledger under one arm while fishing in an inner pocket. I handed mine over with what I hoped was a confident smile. The porter clipped the edge, snip, and returned it. "Change at Silverwood Junction, miss. 22 minutes, he reminded me. I thanked him, and he moved on, boots tapping down the corridor. I glanced at the clock above the door, 7:30. Plenty of time. Rivergate already felt a lifetime behind, yet Silverwood and the daunting business of changing trains was close enough to set a soft tremor in my chest. To steady myself, I uncorked the flask, took a cautious sip of Mother's sweet tea, and eased back into the seat. The landscape transformed again. Orchards bordered the line here, gnarled trees bursting with pink-white blossom, bumblebees drifting lazily between branches. Beyond the orchard stood neat rows of cottages, their gardens awake with marigolds and the bright pinwheels that children plant to catch spring breezes. At one fence, a collie chased its own tail, ears flapping, until the train's passing startled it into furious, useless barking. I laughed aloud, quietly, so as not to disturb my companions, and felt some of the tightness inside me loosen. It may have been the warmth of the sun slanting through the glass, or the gentle rhythm, clack, 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 or the sleepless, night finally exacting its price, but drowsiness settled over me like a shawl. My eyelids grew heavy. I fought it at first. I rolled my shoulders, recited station names under my breath, traced the pattern of the seat fabric with a fingertip. Yet each trick lasted only moments before the train's lullaby reclaimed me. A final memory pierced the eye. Haze. The porter's words. 22 minutes. I calculated. By the pocket watch Father gave me, Silverwood should be no more than a quarter hour away now. I mustn't miss it. Resolute, I opened the satchel, tore off a corner of bread, and chewed, hoping that motion would banish fatigue. It did not. The world blurred. The click of rails stretched into one long, soothing hum. My gaze drifted beyond the window, following a line of poplars that flickered like metronome ticks against the sky. Somewhere beyond them, consciousness slipped. I dreamed, or half dreamed that I was still on the platform at Rivergate, waving as the train whistled. Yet the train would not move, and Father stood just out of reach. His mouth formed words I could not hear. Clouds gathered fast, swirling into the shape of great wings above the station roof. The wings beat once, twice, and the entire scene dissolved into white light. I woke with a start. Nightfall? No, merely the sudden darkness of a tunnel. My pulse drummed in my ears. Across from me, the knitter had dozed. Her scarf lay curled like a red serpent in her lap. The accountant was gone. A new figure occupied the seat diagonally opposite. Broad-shouldered, head bowed beneath the lamp's dim glow. An oilskin coat draped across his knees. I could make out nothing more before daylight burst back, flooding the carriage. I blinked, disoriented, and cast about for landmarks. The tidy orchards were nowhere in sight. Instead, I saw rocky heath and clumps of wind-bent fir. Panic fluttered. I fished out the pocket watch. 9:30. 9:30? Silverwood Junction should have come and gone an hour ago. My breath caught. Had the train not stopped? Had I slept so deeply that I missed the porter's call, the grind of brakes, the bustle of passengers? I could not believe it. Yet the watch told its unforgiving truth. The next scheduled stop, if I remembered the timetable correctly, was Bramblehurst, full 2 counties beyond Silverwood. A cold wave washed through me, prickling my skin even in the sunlit carriage. For the first time, I noticed the broad-shouldered stranger raise his head. His face remained partly in shadow, but I sensed the weight of his scrutiny, curious, almost concerned. I turned quickly back to the window. The hills were steeper here, folded one behind the next like green-blue origami. Beautiful and utterly unfamiliar. I swallowed, steadying my voice as best I could. "Excuse me," I ventured, addressing the knitter, who stirred at the sound. "Did the train stop at Silverwood Junction?" She rubbed her eyes, puzzled. "Silverwood?" Her gaze sought the passing landscape. "Mercy, child, that was some time ago. Bramblehurst is next, if the timetable holds." Her words hammered home the fact I'd dreaded. I thanked her in a whisper and sat back, pulse racing. Outside, the countryside rolled on, indifferent to one small girl's mistake. But to me, the world had shifted. The secure rhythm of the rails now carried an edge, as though each clack drove me farther from the path I was meant to follow. Alone, beyond familiar borders, I faced a journey I had never planned to take. Sunlight glinted off the iron track ahead, drawing a bright, relentless line across the land. With it came a single immutable certainty. Whatever lay beyond Bramblehurst, I would have to meet it, awake, aware, and wholly on my own. Silverwood Junction was lost behind me. There could be no turning back until the train surrendered me to whatever waited at the next station. I folded my trembling hands in my lap, fixed my gaze on the horizon, and whispered the first brave words that came. I will find my way. And the train, tireless and implacable, thundered on. Chapter 3. Stranger in the Carriage. Bramblehurst crouches on a plateau of scrubby heath, its platform flanked by wind-scoured pines and a single iron lamp that sheds more shadow than light. When the train finally screeches to a halt there, the elderly knitter and a handful of others shuffle off. I remain rooted to my seat, pulse hammering, half afraid the conductor will appear and scold me for sleeping past Silverwood Junction. He never comes. The doors clang shut, the whistle shrills, and we lurch forward again, deeper into territory I cannot name. Only 2 passengers now share the compartment. A freckled boy of perhaps 12 who peers through the glass in rapt fascination, and the broad-shouldered man in the oilskin coat. The boy soon grows bored, slips away toward the refreshment car, and leaves me alone with the stranger. For several heartbeats, I simply study him from the corner of my eye. He sits diagonally opposite, elbows braced on his knees, hands clasped, loosely as though steepled in thought. His hair, the shade of dried chestnut bark, is cropped close, but one rebellious lock flops forward whenever the carriage jolts. A small crescent scar marks the ridge of his left cheekbone, as pale as moonlight against sun-browned skin. From beneath the brim of a soft felt hat, his eyes, gray, flecked with an unexpected amber, scan the passing scenery with measured calm. Despite his size, he seems oddly self-contained, like someone accustomed to folding a large life into small spaces. A battered leather satchel rests at his feet, its buckles polished by long use. Tucked into an outer loop is a rolled broadsheet, the Elder Glen Gazette, headline hidden but date fresh, today's. I recall Father's warning, be courteous but cautious. My silence lengthens until it feels conspicuous, and at last the man turns toward me. His expression is mild, almost courteous, yet the sheer scale of him sets my nerves jangling. Miss, are you all right? His voice is low and resonant, carrying the faintest burr of northern hills. A dozen replies tumble through my head. Yes, perfectly fine. I'm meeting friends at the next stop. Please don't speak to me. But what escapes is a timid, I missed my change. His brows lift a fraction, neither amused nor reproachful. Silverwood Junction? I nod, grateful and wary in equal measure. Easy mistake, he says. They shortened the halt this quarter, 7 minutes rather than 10. If the parcels van runs late, no one makes it across the footbridge in time. Happened to me last month. The matter-of-fact kindness of the remark steadies me. I must reach Meadowsend, I admit. My aunt is expecting me there by supper. Meadowsend. He rubs his chin. Then you'll need the Eastern Spur from Greythorn Cross. That's 3 stops on. The connection is tight but doable. Greythorn Cross. The name barely rings a bell, yet it sounds nearer than whatever uncharted stations lie ahead. Thank you, I whisper. A companionable hush settles, broken only by the rhythmic knock of wheels over joints in the rail. Outside, the heath gives way to low stone walls and patches of cultivated land. Ewes graze among early lambs, their coats daubed with blue woad to mark ownership. Clouds pile up in towering anvils, casting sails of shadow that race us across the fields. From the corner of my eye, I notice the stranger flex his right hand, then rotate the wrist as if testing its strength. Across his knuckles runs a lattice of faded scars, thin, silvery, orderly, like seams in well-worn leather. It occurs to me that a mason or a smith might bear such marks, yet the crisp creases of his tailored waistcoat suggest another trade entirely. He catches me observing and, to my surprise, offers a faint smile. Name's Luke, he says with a nod polite enough for a parlor. Luke Mason. The surname strikes me as fitting, though I sense he is no stoneworker. Still, courtesy demands reciprocation. Emily Hart, I reply, schooling my tone to steadiness. Well then, Miss Hart, allow me to congratulate you. On what? On meeting your first challenge of the journey. His grin widens just enough to reveal an unexpected dimple. A missed station may feel disastrous, yet these things often steer us toward curious fortunes. Curious fortunes. I turn the phrase over like a coin. He bends, rummages in his satchel, and produces a neat paper parcel. Gingerbread? He offers. Baked fresh in Thornwick, not store-bought, I promise. I hesitate. Hunger gnaws after my dutifully nibbled crust, but Mother's lessons echo. Never accept food from strangers. Luke appears to read the conflict in my face and lowers the parcel, unoffended. No obligation, he says. Smells better than it tastes after a night on the rails anyway. Almost on cue, my stomach growls. A small, traitorous roar in the quiet carriage. I blush crimson. Luke places the parcel on the seat between us, retreating a respectful distance. Should you change your mind? The conversation subsides. I watch crows wheel above a tangle of hedges where wild roses will bloom come June. My eyelids droop despite the adrenaline. Each mile feels both urgent and interminable. Then the train shrieks round a sharp bend, hurling us against upholstered seats. Luke's arm shoots out instinctively to steady me before I can collide with the window frame. His grip is firm, brief, and gone the instant balance returns. Apologies, he says, reclaiming his own seat. The embankment's undermined there. They've petitioned for repairs, but rail committees move slower than glaciers. I manage a grateful nod, though my heart drums at double cadence now, from terror or shame I cannot tell. To mask it, I glance toward the rolled Gazette. A bold black banner peeks from the fold. Stormcrow Arena welcomes champion. Beneath it, a blurred photograph. A figure mid-motion in what looks like a boxing ring. Fists flying, audience, a frenzy of raised arms. The caption is too small to read. Luke follows my gaze and clears his throat. Sports news, he offers. Never trust the headline writers. They live to gild lilies. Before I can reply, the carriage door slides open again. A boy in a porter's cap, no older than 16, steps inside balancing a tray of tea and seed cakes. Refreshments, folks? He chirps. I shake my head, but Luke purchases 2 tin cups of tea and an extra cake. He leaves 1 cup cooling on the windowsill in front of me. Steam curls upward, carrying the scent of bergamot and clover honey. My gratitude escapes as a soft, "Thank you." He answers with an easy tilt of the hat. Minutes stretch into miles. At last the train whistles long and low, brakes squealing. Graythorn Cross lies ahead, a cluster of slate roofs and a sturdy brick station house girdled by hawthorn trees in bud. My nerves spike anew. "This is my transfer," I murmur. Luke stands, secures his satchel, and reaches overhead for my own bag with practiced efficiency. "The eastern spur departs from the far platform," he explains. "There's a covered footbridge, but the timetable leaves scant margin. Shall I see you across?" I hesitate only a fraction before nodding. His courtesy costs me nothing, and the short connection time could cost me everything. The train sighs to a halt. Doors clatter open. A gust of peat-scented air rushes in. Luke disembarks first, scanning the platform with quick, assessing eyes. Soldierly, I think, and gestures for me to follow. Boots strike weathered planks. Around us, travelers hustle, calling farewells, hefting cases. Somewhere, a station clock. thrums. We cross to the bridge. Beneath its iron trusses the new line waits, engine already chuffing impatiently. Luke's long stride eats the distance, yet he adjusts to match my own, never hurrying me beyond comfort. At the far steps, a uniformed porter raises a flag. The engine bell clangs. Luke hands down my satchel. "Safe journey, Miss Hart. Meadows End in just under 2 hours." I clutch the bag strap. A dozen instincts war. Fear. Gratitude. Questions. I dare not voice. In the end, I settle on honesty. "I misjudged you at first," I confess. "Thank you for your kindness." He tips his hat, eyes creasing with a warm glint. Kindness is merely good investment. Someday you'll pass it forward. Then he steps back, melting into the blur of departing passengers. A whistle slices the morning. I climb aboard the spur train, find a window seat, and glimpse Luke Mason one last time on the platform below. Broad shoulders framed by drifting steam, felt hat lifted in brief salute. Then the carriage glides forward, and he is lost from sight. Only, when Graythorn slips behind, do I notice something wedged inside the satchel flap. The gingerbread parcel, tied with a narrow ribbon of blue, not unlike Mother's, though duller with age. On a scrap of newspaper tucked beneath is a single line in neat capitals. "Every journey is a map of chances. LM." I press the bundle to my chest. Beyond the glass, the countryside resumes its patient roll, but the track feels subtly altered as though one stranger's courtesy has nudged my story onto a kinder set of rails. Whatever waits in Meadowsend, I ride toward it with steadier breath and a heart strange and light, as if someone has quietly set a lantern burning just ahead. Chapter 4. The Silverwood Interlude. The spur train slid eastward with the purposeful quiet of a cat. The carriage is newer, the upholstery the color of ripe heather. Outside, the landscape shifted yet again, from windswept moor to low, lush valleys, embroidered with canals that caught sky blue in their mirror-still surfaces. Willow branches kissed the water. Mallards traced widening rings that vanished in our wake. I let the gingerbread parcel rest untouched on my lap, fingers absently smoothing the ribbon Luke Mason had tied. The scent of treacle and cloves rose each time I breathed, warm enough to quiet the lingering tremor in my chest. Only then did I notice the little card tucked beneath the twine, an advertisement for a boxing exhibition, Stormcrow Arena, Champion. Returns tonight. At the bottom, neat initials confirmed what the broadsheet headline had hinted. LM was none other than the champion himself. Appreciation mingled with astonishment. How casually a person might stride through one's small life, carrying a story large enough to fill a stadium. The conductor announced our first halt, Silverwood Station, 10 minutes only, and the name rang through me like a struck bell. The very place I had slept past was looping back into my day, refusing to be left behind. My pulse quickened. Here, at last, was the lost note on my route, offered once more like a page returned to its book. When the brakes sighed and the train hissed to a gentle stop, sunlight flooded the platform in mellow sheets. Silverwood proved nothing like the lonely halt of Bramblehurst. Rather, it was a cheerful junction painted buttercream, canary yellow trim edging every eave. Potted daffodils brightened the stairwell to the parcels office, and a clock tower wearing a green copper roof chimed the 1:15. A breeze carried hints of pine resin and fresh baker's yeast. Most passengers stretched their legs. I, too, stepped down, careful to note the carriage number lest I return to the wrong seat. The platform bustled but never jostled. A porter cheerfully rolled crates of gooseberries toward a waiting freight wagon. A telegraph boy dashed by, waving a sheaf of yellow envelopes. A brindled cat wove between travelers, tail confidently aloft. Across the track, a modest bookstall beckoned, a scarlet awning, neatly stacked penny novels, and glass jars of boiled sweets that glowed like gemstones in the sun. Behind the counter stood a silver-haired woman with spectacles perched on the tip of her nose. An etched brass plaque named her Mrs. Weatherby, proprietor, and beside it hung a slate announcing hot-spiced cider, 2 pence a mug. I drifted closer, drawn by the twin lures of printed paper and something warm to soothe a growling stomach. "Morning, dear," Mrs. Weatherby greeted, though afternoon had clearly arrived. "You look like a traveler who needs fortification. Ticket inspectors say my cider revives the faint of heart and the footsore alike." I laughed, a small, surprised sound. "In that case, 1 mug, please. And perhaps, do you sell postcards?" Top rack. She poured cider from a copper urn, steam curling, fragrance of apples and cinnamon wrapping about me like a shawl. I selected a view of Silverwood stone viaduct arcing over blue water, bought it with a penny and the cider with another, then carried both to a nearby bench carved with the initials SR for Silverwood Railway. The first sip banished the day's chill and delivered courage in equal measure. I withdrew my fountain pen and addressed the card. "Dear Mother and Father, I have not vanished, merely wandered. Missed my station, but a kind fellow traveler, yes, a stranger, helped me find the way. Expect me by dusk. Please don't fret." I hesitated, then added, Tell Mother her ribbon is safe and earning new stories. A blotter swipe, a quick scan, and the message felt enough. I left space for Aunt Clara's address and resolved to post it the moment I spotted a letterbox. A cluster of voices drew my attention to the station's central notice board. A uniformed station master, resplendent in navy and brass, pinned a fresh telegram alongside the printed timetables. Curious murmurs spread like ripples. There had been a small landslip on the line beyond Meadowsend. Incoming traffic was reduced to a crawl. Outbound held its sidings until further inspection. My heart sank. Would trains halt altogether? Would Aunt Clara, pacing her garden path, imagine every dreadful reason for my delay? I edged closer. The telegram clarified. Single-track operation in force. Expect additional 40-minute transit from Applebrook Viaduct to Meadowsend. 40 minutes, no more. Relief washed through me, long enough to try her patience, but not to upend the day. A tall gentleman in tweed, beside me reading the same notice, clicked his tongue. Inconvenient, but hardly disastrous, he said. Better the railway pause than the hillside tumble altogether. I nodded agreement. His calm diffused my lingering worry. Returning my mug to Mrs. Weatherby, I asked whether a postbox lay near. She pointed toward a red pillar beyond the footbridge and urged, "Mind? The whistle. They shorten the Silverwood stop nowadays." I thanked her, tucked the card inside my satchel for posting at Meadowsend. No sense risking a last-minute dash, and allowed myself one indulgence from her sweet jars. A lemon drop, sharp and bright on the tongue. Back aboard, I found a new seatmate had claimed the place beside my gingerbread parcel. A small girl, maybe 8 years old, traveling with a governess. She gazed at the parcel with undisguised longing. I introduced myself, learned her name, Isabel Clark, and discovered she journeyed to visit her grandparents by the sea. Against every childhood lecture about stranger danger, I untied Luke's ribbon and offered half the gingerbread to Isabel, wrapping it in a linen handkerchief. Her delight proved contagious. Even the severe governess's features softened. Moments later, the guard's whistle blew. Wheels clanked, steam billowed, and Silverwood faded behind a curtain of trees bearing new spring leaves so tender they were almost translucent. I settled into my seat, senses reawakened. Fingers still sticky with honeyed cider, tongue awash in sugar and ginger heat, mind steady as a compass now that the dreaded junction no longer lay ahead. Conversation with Isabel bubbled without effort. She told me about seaside fossils, her dream of seeing a whale, and the exact number of buttons on her grandfather's naval coat. I, in turn, spoke of Aunt Clara's roses and the curious kindness of strangers on trains. The governess listened, needle flashing as she darned a sock, and occasionally added a fact about ammonites or rose propagation. The compartment filled with the easy music of voices mingling with rail song. Outside, the terrain rose in gentle undulations, woodland yielding to farmland again, but richer here, orchards in military rows, beehives painted sky blue, sheep grazing under gigantic oaks older than any memory. Sometimes the track curved beside a river, sunlight dancing on ripples like thrown coins. Other times it pierced cuttings where primroses peeped from cracks in stone. An hour passed. I checked the timetable pinned above the corridor door. 2 stops remained before Meadowsend. The delay at the landslip might slow us further, yet for once I felt no panic. Aunt Clara would wait. Gardens taught patience, she often wrote. I pictured her kettle simmering, a plate of honey cakes kept warm under a cloth embroidered with forget-me-nots. Isabel drifted to sleep against the governess's shoulder. I leaned back and watched clouds gather, gray with promise of late afternoon. Rain. Memory replayed each step of the day. The sleepless dawn, the missed station, the stranger's steady hand, the cider, the cat weaving through travelers' ankles, and a quiet truth unfurled inside me. Adversity, when met with openness, could bloom into unexpected grace. No landmarks announced the edge of Silverwood Parish. It simply dissolved, replaced by meadows where larks ascended in liquid song. Yet the interlude had altered my journey more than distance could measure. It had rewritten the narrative in my head, from girl who errs to girl who adapts. The difference was subtle, like shifting a lantern's position to cast light into a previously darkened corner, but it changed everything I could see. With that thought warming me more surely than cider, I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to hold the moment still, imprinting the lesson on the parchment of my mind. When a path is lost, pause among the daffodils, taste the ginger and the apple, listen for new whistles on the wind. Then choose the next track with a steadier heart. Rain tapped the roof in gentle fingers. The rails hummed onward. And so Silverwood slipped into history, leaving in its quiet. Wake a traveler no longer afraid of missed stations. Chapter 5. Dinner and Distrust. The first fat drops of rain found us 5 miles beyond Applebrook Viaduct, tapping the carriage roof in a staccato that blended with the clatter of wheels. A moment later, the train slowed to a reluctant crawl. Passengers leaned toward the windows, necks craned as if their collective will might push the locomotive faster, but the rails ahead were a bottleneck of single-track operation. One line still clear, the other choked with mud and fallen brush from the landslip. T.I. Applebrook. Halt! The guard made his announcement, calm, practiced, entirely unwelcome. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall pause here while crews clear the obstruction. Expect a delay of 2 hours. You may disembark for refreshments at the station hostelry. A hot supper has been arranged at the Applebrook Arms for through ticket holders. A ripple of complaint swept the compartment. Isabel Clark, my small seatmate, gave a drowsy whimper. Her governess soothed her with murmured French. I felt the tug of two equal urges: remain sealed in the safety of my seat, or join the exodus in search of warmth and food. The deciding voice was my stomach's low, traitorous growl. Nearly a full day had passed since I'd choked down Father's crust and the single mug of cider at Silverwood. I tucked the gingerbread parcel deeper inside the satchel, for later, I told myself, and followed the dispersing crowd onto the dripping platform. Applebrook Village perched on the edge of a shallow valley, more crossroads than settlement. Beyond the station lamps, I could just discern a huddle of slate roofs and one square church tower blurred by rain. Directly opposite the exit stood the Applebrook Arms, 3 stories of weather-beaten sandstone, ivy tangling its gutters, a wooden sign creaking in the wind. Golden lamplight glowed behind ripple glass windows, promising hearth heat and supper. I hesitated beneath the station awning, then stepped into the wet night. Inside, the inn smelled of damp wool, spilled ale, and something savory bubbling in iron cauldrons. A cheerful chaos reigned. Railway passengers packed every table, shrugging off coats, shaking umbrellas, exclaiming about the delay as though it were the day's most thrilling adventure. I was swept forward on a tide of elbows and satchels until a harried maid thrust a chipped plate into my hands. "Stew's by the hearth, miss. Bread's beside it. Find a chair if you can." The stew proved a thick rabbit ragout laced with thyme. Steam fogged my spectacles as I ladled a portion, then searched the tavern for an open seat. I spotted one at a corner table already occupied by 3 men. Quiet, watchful types with the insistent stillness of jackdaws on a branch. My instinct warned me elsewhere, yet every other chair vanished beneath new arrivals. Gathering what poise I could, I approached. "May I sit?" A grizzled fellow with ink-black hair and a trimmed mustache gave a perfunctory nod. His companions shifted wordlessly. Room appeared between them like a fissure inviting me to fall in. I thanked them and set down my plate. For a time we ate, In parallel silence, the clink of spoons the only speech. I kept my eyes on the stew, but peripheral vision recorded plenty. The square shoulders beneath their heavy coats, calloused hands bearing tiny white scars. The faintest tattoo, a sparrow or maybe a swallow, just visible at the wrist of the mustached man each time his sleeve rode up. When at last my hunger subsided, the inn's other sounds seeped back. Logs crackling, tankards thudding, a barmaid laughing too brightly. A clock above the mantel read 6:15. I would still reach Meadowsend by night if, and only if, the line reopened promptly. I sipped water, listening. Stormcrow purse is up to 60 quid, they say, murmured the man with the tattoo, wiping his mouth on a napkin. 60, aye, but not for the likes of us, answered the second. A broad man with sandy brows and a voice like gravel dragged in a bucket. Odds on the champion are 2-1. Still worth a flutter. The third, quietest of the trio, merely grunted and tapped ash from a cheroot into the empty bowl of his stew. A champion. My thoughts leapt unbidden to Luke Mason and the boxing card tucked beneath gingerbread. Could these men be bound for the same arena? Their rough exteriors matched the crowds father once described at provincial prize fights. I edged my plate away and reached for my satchel where it rested against my boots. Everything appeared in order, until my fingers met only leather. The buckle hung open. Heart stuttering, I patted again. The ribboned parcel was gone. Panic flared, shrill, instantaneous, only to be smothered by caution. A cry of alarm would solve nothing and mark me prey. I forced my hand to stillness and lifted the satchel into my lap, pretending to adjust the strap. Eyes down, I traced the bag's pockets, the letter to Aunt Clara, the pocket watch, the postcard, all present. Only Luke's gift was missing. Relief and disappointment tangled. Sentimentally precious, yes, but not irreplaceable. A shadow loomed. The mustached man had risen to fetch ale. As he turned, I glimpsed brown paper protruding from his coat pocket, the very parcel, ribbon crushed. But unmistakable. The injustice stung like a slap, yet spontaneity sealed my lips. What retaliation could I mount? Accuse him amid his fellows and risk mockery? Or worse, disbelief? I swallowed my protest. Moments later he returned, tankards foaming. "Share a pint, lass?" he offered with boisterous cheer that did not reach his eyes. The condensation on the mug traced chilled fingers down my spine. "No, thank you," I said, fixing polite gravity to my words. "I've tea enough aboard." He shrugged, turned to his companions. Their conversation resumed at a lower pitch, phrases riding the edge of audibility. Runner in the crowd. Big payout if he folds by the 6th. Boxing talk, certainly, spattered with names of betting dens along the southern coast. Each time I tried not to listen, words threaded through the low roar of the tavern until I could not ignore the chill gathering under my skin. Across the room, a bell clanged. The station master, coat slick with rain, called, "Applebrook passengers, prepare to reboard. Clear track ahead. 10 minutes only." A collective flutter of relief swept the crowd. Benches scraped, coins clinked for unpaid drinks. I rose as well, eager to flee those furtive men and their pocketed theft. The mustached fellow intercepted me, blocking the narrow aisle. "Leaving already? We'd barely begun to know you." "I mustn't miss the train." I stepped sideways. He mirrored. A thin smile cut across his face. "Tickets, money, baggage, all safe," he drawled. My pulse hammered behind my ears. Did he taunt me deliberately? Parcel hidden like a cat with stolen cream? Words wedged behind my teeth. Then the sandy-browed man laid a hand on his arm. "Let the girl pass, Hawk," he muttered, eyeing me with a weariness that did not feel unkind. "Hawk," or Hawk, snorted, but shifted his boot half an inch. Enough. I slid past, skirt brushing, damp chair legs ignoring the heat of their stares drilling my back. Rain lashed sideways as we filed onto the platform. Lamplight fractured in puddles. Smoke curled beneath the station canopy. I joined the queue, thankful for the governess's familiar bonnet ahead, Isabel trotting beside her like a pony. Inside the carriage, I claimed a seat near them, though, separated by the aisle. Safety and proximity, I reasoned. Only after the whistle screeched and the train jolted forward did I release the breath I'd held since leaving the inn. I peered down the corridor. Hawk and his friends had boarded another coach, mercifully distant. Still, the sense of being watched lingered, as if their glances clung to the folds of my coat. When the rhythm of travel steadied, I opened the satchel. Again, something new lay at the top. A rectangle of stiff cards smelling faintly of tobacco. I slipped it free. A visiting card. Cream stock. Gilt border. Mr. Elias Hawk, proprietor, Hawk and Company Sporting Wagers, Kingsport Harbor. Scrawled on the back in slanted charcoal pencil, Champion Falls, Fortune rises. Keep your eyes open, little traveler. A chill ran the length of my spine. The message felt both threat and invitation, a talon testing the fabric of my composure. I thought of Luke Mason stepping into Stormcrow's ring, of odds whispered across tavern tables, and of strangers who did not play fair with gingerbread. or with boxers. I folded the card once, twice, slid it into a hidden pocket, and snapped the buckle tight. Outside, night had fallen in earnest. Raindrops streaked the glass like molten silver. Meadow's End lay perhaps 50 minutes ahead, yet the distance felt measured in choices rather than miles. The taste of rabbit stew lingered with an unexpected bitterness, but beneath it a core of iron settled in me, hammered thin yet resilient by the evening's revelations. Dinner had filled me. Distrust had woken me. I would be ready for whatever test the dark rails delivered next. Chapter 6. A secret plea night grinds against the carriage windows like a whetstone, sharpening every creak and murmur into something sinister. Rain still rifles the glass, but the rhythm has slowed, grown heavy. The engine, too, seems to labor, muffled by miles of drenched hedgerow. We are 50 minutes from Meadowsand, a distance I could once have measured in heartbeats. Now it feels as remote as the moon. Across the aisle, little Isabel slumbers, fingers tangled in a rag doll's yarn hair, the governess dozing straight-backed beside her. Beyond them the corridor lies dim, lanterns flickering amber pools on slick linoleum. I have not spotted Hawk or his companion since boarding, yet my skin insists on their presence, as if the very air has memorized their tobacco and iron scent. The carriage sways. Water sluices under the wheels. I picture the single-track section, a narrow path cut through shale and sodden turf, and the thought of an accident blooms, unwelcome as mold. A landslip could be coaxed, Father once said. Loosen the earth, time the weight, and gravity does the rest. If gamblers wished the champion delayed, injured, gone entirely, my pulse jumps. I draw out Hawk's visiting card, its gilt edges flashing, like a warning fang in the lamplight. Champion falls. Fortune rises. Men have done worse for smaller fortunes. My fist curls round the card until it creases. What can a lone girl do from a seat on a night train? Crying out will seem foolish. Confronting a pack of grown men. Lunacy. Yet silence tastes of complicity. An idea, fragile as spun sugar, forms. Enlist another's hand. Ink a plea the villains will not see. I kneel on the seat, shielding my actions, with my coat. From the satchel come Aunt Clara's blank envelopes, a stub of pencil, and Luke's blue ribbon, rescued after all from Hawk's pocket when he jostled me on the platform. He must never have noticed it slip free. A small, treacherous joy lights my chest. Even thieves have careless moments. On the back of Hawk's own card, I print in cramped capitals, "Danger aboard. Stop watch for men marked with swallow tattoo. Stop. They plot harm to Stormcrow champion. Stop warn Luke Mason before arena. Stop pass quietly. Trust no one." I pause, chew the pencil, then add a signature the conductor might believe. From a friend in transit. Too vague? Too bold? I cannot judge. The train shudders and time thins like ice underfoot. I tuck the card into an envelope, seal it, and knot Luke's ribbon round the middle, a flourish only he and I would recognize. It must reach someone with authority, or Luke himself before we arrive. The next question: how to deliver it unseen. I peer down the corridor. No one stirs. A service door near the lavatory stands ajar, leading to the guard's van. If I can slip the envelope into the leather dispatch satchel conductors use, it will reach whichever official signs for packages at Meadows End. From there, with luck, a telegraph can outrace Hawk's scheme. I stand, careful not to wake Isabel, and move into the corridor. The carriage rocks, shadows lurch. Halfway to the guard's van, a door ahead swings open. Hawk himself emerges, broad as a barn in the narrow space. Our gazes collide. His surprise lasts only a heartbeat. Then his mouth folds into that sliver of a smile, all wolfish leisure. "Evenin', little traveler," he purrs. "Stretching your legs?" Words desert me. I clutch the envelope behind my back. The ribbon tickles my wrist like a panicked pulse. He saunters closer. Lamplight catches the swallow tattoo as his cuff rides up. "Lost something earlier, didn't you? Hate seeing nice things mislaid?" He knows, or guesses enough to frighten me. I step aside to let him pass, but his arm shoots out, palm braced on the wall, blocking the way. The train jolts. My shoulder brushes his coat. Beneath the wool, I feel the ridge of something hard. A flask? A kosh? Move. The word bursts, louder than intended. Hawk's eyebrows rise in mock offense. Temper, temper. Voices stir in the compartment behind me. The governess, perhaps. Hawk's eyes flick toward the sound. Calculation dims their amusement. He lowers his arm, tips an imaginary hat, and strolls aft, boots thudding down the corridor. I force myself to walk, not run, the opposite direction. At the guard's van, the air smells of coal dust and wet rope. Lanterns sway, parcels slide on the racks with soft thumps. A canvas mailbag gapes from a hook. Perfect. I slip the ribboned envelope inside, shove it beneath a stack of waybills, and turn to go. only to find the guard himself entering, mustache bristling at the intrusion. Passenger access prohibited. What's your business here, miss? His tone is stern but not unkind. Lie or trust? Ice floods my limbs. I choose truth stripped to its bones. Sir, dangerous men are on the train. They mean harm to a boxer and Stormcrow. Please, deliver that envelope. I point with shaking finger. He follows the gesture, frowns. Boxer? Stormcrow? Rain drums overhead. The guard studies me, the worry in my face, the trembling hands, and whatever he sees softens him. He retrieves the envelope, weighs it. Name? Emily Hart. He tucks the packet into his breast pocket. All right, Miss Hart. I'll see it reaches the station master at Meadowsend. Now back to your seat. And bolt the door, do you hear? Relief dizzying as champagne surges through me. Thank you, I whisper. I obey, hurrying along the corridor as the whistle outside wails a long descending note, the warning before we enter the valley tunnel. Inside the compartment, I secure the latch, sink onto the seat. The governess's eyes open, questioning. I mutter something about fresh air. She nods and dozes again. Isabel still sleeps, lashes dark crescents on her cheeks. I watch the night race past, but the darkness inside feels lighter now, threaded with the smallest filament of hope. Somewhere ahead, Stormcrow Arena blazes with gaslights. Somewhere in its changing room, Luke Mason wraps his hands, unaware of men who wager on his fall. Perhaps my ribboned plea will reach him in time. Perhaps the guard will scoff and forget. Yet the act of writing, of doing, steadies me. I have thrown my thought like a stone into a black pool. Whatever ripples come, I will meet them. The engine screams, plunging into the tunnel. In the rush of echoing thunder, I close my eyes around. A single prayer. Let the letter fly straighter than fear. Let a champion remain standing. Let dawn find us all on safer ground. Chapter 7. The Hidden Agenda. When the train finally ground to a halt at Meadowsend, the hour was so late that the platform lamps burned low on their last ration of oil. Rain had slackened to a misty drizzle, and fog pooled waist-deep between the tracks, ghost white in lamplight. Most passengers hurried straight for the village omnibus, eager for bed and hot bricks. I lingered beneath the eaves, clutching my satchel, scanning the thinning crowd for Aunt Clara's familiar felt bonnet. No sign of her. No sign of the conductor either, the one who had pocketed my ribbon-bound letter. For one uneasy moment I wondered whether he had dismissed my warning after all. Then I spotted him inside the telegraph office, collar slick with damp, dictating a message while the station master tapped the key at frantic speed. Relief bloomed. The Plea had not stalled. A horse-drawn cab trundled up. Its driver called passengers forward. I hesitated. Clara's cottage lay a good mile outside the village, down lanes as dark as coal shafts. No safe walk for a girl alone. I weighed my dwindling coins against the cab fare and had just resolved to spend them when a tall silhouette detached itself from the deeper shadows. Luke Mason, coat flung open like a storm sail, strode into the circle of light, face rain-speckled, eyes scanning for someone. They found me at once. "Miss Hart," he called, surprise softening into stern concern. "You should be indoors. Meadows send air slices sharper than a scythe at this hour." "I'm looking for my aunt," I began, but he raised a hand. "Aunt Clara Hawthorne?" She sent a note to the arena when the schedule changed. "A neighbor took ill. She's sitting the sickbed. Ask that I fetch you." He gestured toward a motor car idling beyond the portico, its brass lamps glaring through the fog, a marvel of modernity beside the tired cab. The coincidence pricked me. "How did she know you, sir?" A faint smile tugged his scar. "Miss Hawthorne volunteers with the Town Relief Society. We boxed at the same charity gala 3 winters past. Ruined. Her best china by setting a trophy on it." He offered his elbow, impeccable manners smoothed over urgency. "Come. The sooner you're warm, the sooner I can keep my own appointment." His own appointment, Stormcrow Arena, loomed only 20 miles east. Time pressed on him the way worry pressed on me. Yet doubt flickered. What if the note were false? What if Hawk's crew had forged the message to draw Luke, and me, into their snare? I opened my mouth to question, but voices drifted from the far end of the platform. Hawk and the sandy-browed companion, half hidden behind a freight wagon. "Powder's in the resin," Hawk muttered. "Rub it on his gloves during the touch gloves ceremony. 1 round and the champ's eyes will burn like lye. Odds swing our way, purse triples." My blood iced. So that was their scheme. Blind Luke with a caustic dust concealed in his own gloves. Fix the fight, make a killing. I stared at the boxer before me, unaware, affable, extending an arm to guide me to safety. He followed my gaze toward the freight wagon. Suspicion quickened his features. "You know those men?" he asked. "I overheard enough to fear them." I dropped my voice, heart pounding. "They plan to sabotage your bout. I've already sent warning by telegraph, but they're here now with the substance." Luke's jaw tightened. A strange mixture of anger and gratitude flickered in his gray-flecked eyes. Then the hidden agenda is theirs, not mine, he said, voice low but steady. Yet I must fight. Thousands bought tickets. Charity purses depend on it. He looked toward the motor car. A driver waited, cap glossy with drizzle, engine ticking like an impatient clock. Luke turned back to me. Come, we'll discuss on the road. Easier to plot when wheels are spinning. I hesitated only a breath, then slipped my hand through his offered arm. Inside the car's leather cabin, the smell of machine oil mixed with wet wool. Luke gave the driver a curt nod. First stop, Hawthorne Cottage on Briar Lane, then Stormcrow Arena. Open the throttle. We're late. The engine growled. Meadowsend lamps fled backward into fog. Luke leaned close so the driver could not hear. Tell me everything from the start. Words rushed out. Silverwood cider, stolen gingerbread, Hawk's taunts, the visiting card, the secret plea shoved into the mailbag. Luke listened unblinking, yet his fists flexed as though already in the ring. They'll try again, he said when I finished. If the officials intercept that letter, Hawk's men may switch tactics. I can bar my cornermen from touching the gloves, but the scoundrels could seed the ring ropes, lace the water, slip a weight in the opponent's wrap. Any trick. You can withdraw, I whispered. He shook his head. Withdraw, and rumor spreads that the champion quailed. Sponsors vanish. The orphanage fund evaporates. I have a hidden agenda too, Emily. Every guinea I win tonight repairs 3 more beds and stocks the pantry for winter. I won't surrender that. His conviction steadied me like a hand pressed to my back on a swaying deck. Then we outwit them, I said, surprising myself. Fight, but on your terms. He glanced sideways. You have a scheme? Not yet, I admitted. But Aunt Clara says puzzles are only impossible until named aloud. Let's name the pieces. He considered. Piece 1, Hawk's crew need proximity. Piece 2, they'll carry the irritant powder. Piece 3, authorities will act if they catch them with it. He drummed scarred knuckles on the window glass. So we lure them into discovery. The motor car swerved round a bend. Hedges whipped by like dark surf. Inspiration darted. Your gloves, I said. Could you pretend they're stored in your kit bag in some unattended room? Something valuable Hawk can't resist tampering with? A half smile cut across his face. Leave bait in the lion's path. You think bold, Miss Hart? Their own boldness will undo them, I replied. He rasped a quiet laugh, then grew sober. danger shadows you too. If Hawk spots you at the arena, I'll sit in the press gallery, I said, pulse quickening. Faces blur in a crowd. Besides, I carry a witness. I tapped Hawk's card in my pocket. Evidence, if need be. Luke leaned back, drawing a steadying breath. Very well. When we reach the arena, you'll hand that card to my manager, Franklin Doyle. Trim mustache, silver cane. Tell him everything. He'll place you among the reporters. His gaze softened. You've carried more weight today than anyone ought to at your age. I'm learning to lift it, I answered, though nerves fluttered like bats in my stomach. Hawthorne. Cottage appeared as a warm blot of candlelight beneath dripping ivy. Luke insisted on escorting me to the gate despite urgency. Aunt Clara burst onto the porch the moment tires crunched gravel, shawl trailing, tears bright. She folded me against her lavender-scented apron, scolding and thanking heaven in the same breath. Luke waited in respectful shadow until Clara spotted him, then clasped his hand with fierce affection, pressing a paper parcel, rose petal salve for bruises, into his coat pocket. When farewells were done, he tipped his hat to me. Next we meet, may the bell find me still on my feet. With that he climbed back into the car and roared away, tail lamps dwindling like twin rubies swallowed by the night. I watched until darkness erased all trace. Only then did I feel the full tremor of the day seep into my bones. Yet, threaded through it, ran a bright wire of purpose. The hidden agendas of gamblers and champions had collided with the unexpected agenda of one sleepless girl, and together we had fashioned a plan. I turned toward the open door where Aunt Clara waited. Inside lay warmth, cocoa, a hastily stoked fire. But beyond the hills, storm crow lights blazed. Somewhere Hawk's crew plotted. Somewhere the champion unwrapped linen and breathed calm before the storm. My journey, I knew, was not quite over. Chapter 8. The Grand Arena. Morning broke, thin and pewter gray, but I woke before the first rook called from the lime trees outside Aunt Clara's gate. I had slept little, an hour here, a half hour there, yet my mind felt sharpened, honed, on fear and purpose. Downstairs the fire still glimmered under its banked ash. Clara met me in the kitchen with a cup of chicory and a single raised eyebrow. I knew what it meant. You intend to finish what you started. I promised Luke Mason I would get evidence into his manager's hands, I told her, voice steadier than my heart. If I stay here, I break that promise. Clara's sigh misted, the rim of her cup, but sympathy outweighed protest. She fetched her rain cloak from the peg and fastened it about my shoulders herself, knotting the sash with nurse-like efficiency. "Very well," she said, pressing a half loaf and a flask of milk tea into my satchel. "But you take the 9 o'clock coach, daylight coach, and when the bout is done, you come straight home in the company of someone respectable or not at all. Understood?" I kissed her cheek by way of answer. Journey to Stormcrow. The steam coach rattled east past water meadows jeweled with kingcups. I rehearsed my story until the wheels made a drum of the words hawk, powder, sabotage. In my pocket lay his visiting card, and folded around it, the crimson ribbon rescued from the gingerbread, my secret countersignature for Luke. By 10:30, guttural roars of distant crowds seeped through the coach windows. Stormcrow Arena crowned the slope above Kingsport Road, a great iron-ribbed amphitheater ringed with flagpoles, their bunting snapping like impatient whips in the wind. Queues snaked from every gate, dock workers in Sunday caps, well-heeled patrons, draped in fox, bootblacks, bootleggers, urchins hawking matchbooks, even a cluster of nuns shielding their ears from boisterous chants. Above the main arch, a giant canvas poster rippled. Tonight, 3 p.m. sharp. Luke, the Orchard Giant. Mason versus Rufus. The Ringwolf Daughtry. Thunder of hooves drew my gaze to the side lane. A procession of police wagons, mounted constables sent for crowd control, perhaps, or summoned by Luke's manager after receiving my warning. Either way, their presence heartened me. It meant the message had traveled faster than Hawk's malice. I threaded through ticket holders until I spotted a brass-tilted kiosk labeled Accredited Press. Inside stood a narrow gentleman with a silver-capped cane, exactly as Luke had described. The queue parted none too politely as I pushed forward. "Mr. Franklin Doyle?" I whispered. Gray brows arched like startled gull wings. "Indeed, though I don't believe we've met." I drew Hawk's card, ribbon still looped. "Luke Mason said to place this evidence in your hand. Saboteurs are here. Gloves and water may be fouled." Doyle's cane thumped once on cedar, floorboards, an involuntary stamp of alarm. "My word. Come with me." He ushered me behind the kiosk, straight through a side door and along a corridor thick with the smell of resin and liniment. Back corridor conspiracies. The corridor led to the fighter's wing. Posters of past champions lined the walls. Sepia men frozen mid-jab under glass. We stopped at a dressing room door guarded by a barrel-chested official with a rosette reading British Boxing Board of Control. Inspection only, Doyle told. The guard. New information regarding the champion's kit. The guard allowed us through. Inside, Luke stood shirtless, wrists half-laced with tape while his cut man fussed at a stubborn wrinkle. Purple bruises from earlier bouts marbled his shoulders, but the calm in his eyes landed on me like shelter. He inclined his head. Emily kept her promise, I see. I handed Doyle the card. He read Hawk's penciled scrawl, lips compressing to a single blade-thin line. We must have the commissioner check all equipment now before the ceremonial touch gloves. Luke's trainer, bald, beet red, snorted. You try slowing that show pony Daughtry. His camp bribed half the officials to keep schedules tight. Then, we create delay of our own, Luke said. A slipped bandage, a reweigh. He met my gaze again. Will you be safe ringside? I have a seat in the press tier, Doyle answered for me. And 2 constables will shadow her. That was settled, it seemed. Luke thanked me with a nod, then turned to finish wrapping his hands, now under the commissioner's hawk-eyed supervision. Arena of noise and light. Doyle escorted me to the amphitheater's inner rim, a steep horseshoe of benches descending to the squared ring. Heat and sound rolled upward in waves, roar of vendors, stamp of boots on timber planks, sharp metallic clangs as men tested cowbells and fight gongs. Overhead, gas chandeliers blazed against the afternoon gloom, lusters swinging like brazen planets. My seat perched behind the sports journalists. Ink-stained men in derby hats shouted shorthand to each other, predicting knockouts and counting column inches they'd sell at dawn. A hush fell, swift and total, as ring announcers in swallowtail coats strode between ropes. The program unfurled, 2 quick undercard bouts to prime appetites. They ended in predictable flurries of blood and applause. Then came the formalities. Mayor's speech, children's choir singing Jerusalem, flash photographers igniting, phosphor so bright it carved white ghosts behind my eyes. Backstage, movements caught my attention. Through a gap in the curtains, I spied Hawk and his sandy-browed accomplice. They wore volunteer badges, access to neutral corner buckets and towels. So the enemy is inside the camp, I thought, stomach twisting. At 3 minutes to 3, Luke emerged down the runway, robe of forest green satin embroidered with a white apple tree blooming across the shoulders. A roar of approval surged. Orchard Guyant, Orchard Guyant, rolling like surf against cliff. He entered the ring, bowed to each side, then crossed himself briefly, face a mask of iron patience. Daughtry followed, draped in crimson. His supporters brayed insults across the ropes. The referee called them center ring for the ritual hand touch. I craned forward. Hawk stood at Daughtry's corner, fist closed around something. A pinch of powder? But two constables drew near, bracketing him. Doyle must have deployed them. Hawk's hand opened, empty. He stepped back, smirk curled like smoke. The fighters touched gloves. No suspicious dust, no sleight of hand. Yet dread lingered. Hawk would have fallback tricks. For bait in the lion's path. As round one commenced, I felt the constable at my left shift. He murmured, "We've a note from Mr. Doyle. Stay in your seat no matter what." I nodded, fists buried in my cloak. The first round unfolded cautiously. Luke, testing reach, Daughtry bobbing, feinting, chance ricocheted. End of the round, Luke's corner bustled. I narrowed eyes. A towel boy trotted out, one I hadn't seen earlier, bearing a water bottle. The commissioner intercepted it, sniffed, frowned, poured a splash on his own sleeve. The fabric smoked. My breath seized. The crowd hadn't noticed. They roared for the bell. Commissioner signaled the head referee, who in turn waved constables across the apron. Hawkish cries erupted in Daughtry's corner. "Planted evidence! Frame up!" But powder residue on the offending bottle glowed under a phosphorus lamp the officials produced. Hawk tried to slip from the scrum, but the sandy-browed accomplice buckled. Two policemen seized them both. Hawk's eyes locked on mine as they dragged him up the aisle, hat knocked askew, teeth bared in a snarl that promised retribution beyond bars. I did not flinch, though cold sweat traced my spine. The arena audience, half ignorant of specifics, sensed drama. Murmurs swelled. Sabotage, poison, foul play. Officials conferred briefly, then declared the match would continue. Gloves examined, corners searched. Daughtry protested, but the referee's decision stood. Clean fight or forfeit. 15 minutes of thunder. Round 2 thundered into motion. Freed from covert threat, Luke fought with brutal grace, left jabs like pistons, body shots thumping. Daughtry's ribs. The ringwolf proved game, countering with savage hooks, but his footwork faltered under Luke's reach. By round 4, Daughtry's nose streamed crimson. Mason's right eye purpled but burned with resolve. Each bell felt like a drum inside my ribs. Sweat, rosin, and blood mingled in the air until the very planks reeked of battle. reporters scribbled. In frenetic shorthand, flashbulbs seared retinas. Round 6. Daughtry launched a desperate overhand. Luke slipped inside, pivoted, delivered an uppercut so perfect the audience gasped as one creature. Daughtry dropped to one knee, blinked, tried to rise, count of 8, 9, 10. The gong drowned human voices. A tidal roar of ecstasy swept the arena. Hats flung, papers waved. Luke lifted both taped fists, face split by a weary grin, scar flashing under chandeliers. Officials crowded him, but he searched the tears until his gaze found me. I raised the blue ribbon high above my head, the small symbol of a stranger's, pact. He pressed his hand to his heart in reply. Aftermath. Police escorted Hawk and his cohort through a side gate, jeers nipping their heels. Reporters chased the scandal. Bigger headline than any knockout. Doyle beckoned me ringside. He looked 10 years older, relief melting his severity. "Well played, Miss Emily," he breathed. "The board will issue lifetime bans." Luke, still, glistening with sweat and victory, joined us. In the maelstrom he spoke quietly, as if we stood alone in an orchard at dusk. "You saved more than one fight today. You saved my name." "You saved yourself," I answered. "I only carried a ribbon." He laughed, winced at a cracked rib. Ribbons, like punches, carry weight when placed right. Homeward Lanterns by Kean. Twilight, a hansom cab carried me back along the Kingsport Road with 2 constables sharing the roof, courtesy of Doyle. We passed fields awash with evening mist, hedgerows flickering with the first glowworms of summer. Exhaustion settled over me, bone deep but sweet. Aunt Clara waited by the rose gate, porch lamp held aloft. I spilled the story over bread and leek soup, voice hoarse, eyes bright. She listened, smiling through tears once the end proved happier than the beginning. Later, in the quiet of the guest room, I laid Luke's ribbon across the washstand mirror where moonlight kissed its faded strands. Tomorrow papers would trumpet scandal and triumph, but I would carry a simpler headline in my heart. Courage shares many gloves. And in the hush before sleep, I imagined a train whistle far away, no longer a harbinger of wrong turns, but the sound of paths converging, of strangers choosing light over profit, and of one orchard giant whose fists that night had hammered truth back into its rightful place beneath the gaslit sky. Chapter 9. Triumph and Trust. I woke to sunlight slanting through Aunt Clara's lace curtains, motes of dust spinning like champagne bubbles in the beam. For once I did not feel the quick jolt of uncertainty that had greeted every dawn since leaving home. Instead, a slow warmth spread through me, the echo of last night's cheers still humming in my bones. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of cinnamon porridge and newsprint ink. Aunt Clara sat at the oak table, spectacles perched on the tip of her nose, reading the Kingsport Courier. When she heard my footsteps, she lifted the front page so I could see the headline splashed in Gothic type, "Orchard Giant Fends Off Foul Plot. Mason Knocks Out. Ringwolf. Saboteurs Arrested." Beneath the words blazed a photograph taken the instant Luke's final uppercut landed. Daughtry sagging, Luke's arm still mid-arc, Scar catching the flare of the chandelier like a bolt of silver. Lightning. Clara's eyes shone over the rim of the paper. "Justice printed on the very first page," she said, sliding a steaming bowl toward me. "Eat. You'll need strength for the parade of visitors who mean to shake your hand." "Visitors?" I asked, spoon half lifted. She chuckled, tapped the headline. "When a country girl topples a betting syndicate, word travels faster than influenza." I had just set my spoon down when a light knock rattled the back door latch. A telegraph boy, cheeks red from pedaling uphill, thrust a buff envelope into my hands. "Hart Residence." Rivergate was inked in Father's precise script. I tore it open, so proud. "Stop. Trust your judgment. Stop." Mother baking ginger scones for heroin. Stop. Love. Father. Tears threatened. I swiped them away with the heel of my palm. At that moment, hooves clopped on gravel. Through the window, I glimpsed a familiar motor car pulling up, brass lamps winking in the morning sun. Luke Mason stepped out, a tweed coat draped over his broad frame, hat clasped respectfully in one hand. He moved a touch slower than last night, ribs bound beneath the shirt, perhaps, but the grin he wore could have lit Stormcrow Arena without a single gas jet. Behind him came Franklin Doyle and two children, barefoot, freckled, each clutching a tissue-wrapped parcel. Aunt Clara hurried to open the door. Luke filled the threshold with warm, rain-scented air and that indefinable presence people gather around without realizing. He bent to kiss Clara's hand, then turned to me. "Miss Hart?" he said, voice hoarse from 1,000 reporters' questions. "The orphanage trustees insisted I deliver their thanks in person, and I had my own debt to settle." He motioned the children forward. They offered the parcels shyly. Inside each lay a paper heart sewn with crooked stitches, red felt, blue thread. One bore my initials, E.H., the other Luke's. My throat tightened. Every penny of the purse went to new beds and medicine, Luke explained. But the children said victories taste better when shared. He paused. May we come in? Teacups and testimony. We gathered in the sitting room around Clara's silver tray. Luke perched carefully on the settee. Doyle folded his long legs onto a footstool, while the two orphans, Maisie and Thomas, balanced teacups with the solemnity of diplomats. Between sips, Doyle produced parchment emblazoned with the boxing board. Seal and slid it toward me. Your signed statement, Miss Hart. The constables corroborated every detail. Hawk and 3 accomplices face conspiracy charges. He tapped his silver cane on the rug. Should the case reach court, your testimony will be decisive. The idea of a witness box, gavels echo, rows of stern faces, sent ice along my spine, yet another feeling rose to meet it. Steadiness. I'll testify, I said. They banked on fear. Fear won't sign their release. Luke's grin broadened. Spoken like a fighter. He reached into his coat and withdrew a tiny tissue-wrapped bundle. Something strayed from your satchel last night, he said, placing it on my palm. I unfolded the tissue. The gingerbread ribbon lay coiled inside, but now a small silver pendant threaded its loop. A boxing glove no bigger than a hazelnut, engraved with the date of the bout. I can't accept this, I protested. You must, Luke countered gently. Trust isn't an abstract idea. It's a thing you pass forward, like a glove before the opening bell. He winked at Maisie and Thomas, who nodded with exaggerated wisdom. 2 streets paved with cheering. By midday, we set out for Kingsport's Riverside district where the orphanage stood. Word of Luke's arrival had rippled ahead. Shopkeepers leaned over counters. Chimney sweeps waved sooty caps. Factory whistles piped a ragged salute. Children peeled from alleyways, trailing behind our hackney like ducklings. Above the orphanage gate, a hastily painted sign read, Welcome, champion and friend. The matron, Ms. Caldwell, received us beneath a trellis of climbing sweet peas, eyes damp behind wire rings. Dormitory windowsills were crowded with faces. Dozens of wide eyes that had prayed sleep would bring warm food, and came awake to find hope knocking in daylight. Luke toured every corridor, stooping to speak to each child at eye level. He showed them how to wrap hands with strips of cloth, how to jab the air without hyperextending an elbow. Laughter ricocheted off walls once dulled by coughs. Doyle handed Miss Caldwell a ledger stamped paid in full. I found myself stationed at the infirmary where a line of younger ones queued for portraits with Emily the Brave. They draped the pendant's ribbon round their necks, mimicking my stance. Chin up, shoulders square. Trust, I realized, can seed itself faster among children than any other crop. A shadow in the crowd. Festivity spilled into the street where a brass band assembled to lead us toward the dockside for an impromptu celebratory luncheon funded by Doyle. Yet halfway through the first march, I noticed a figure leaning against a lamppost. Bowler hat pulled low, collar up despite soft spring warmth. Sandy brows, the accomplice who had tried to slip away last night. Not in chains, though. I had watched constables cuff him. Released on bail already? His eyes tracked Luke, then shifted to the children, calculating as though coin glittered on their heads. A shiver traced my spine. I touched Luke's elbow. "We're watched," I murmured. His gaze flicked once, found the man, hardened. "Stay with the children," he ordered quietly, then waded through the throng to Doyle, who dispatched a courier for constables. Within minutes, Sandy Brows had vanished, but so had Maisie. Panic slammed my chest. She had stood beside me seconds earlier, tugging my sleeve to ask if orphans could plant sweet peas too. Now her spot was empty. I fought the rising tide of voices, scanning, calling her name. At the alley mouth leading toward the tannery yards, I spied a flash of calico, her dress. Beside it, a rough hand. I shouted. Luke turned mid-stride, saw what I saw, and bolted like a sprinter. Distantly, I registered Doyle herding children to the orphanage gate while Aunt Clara flagged policemen. I did not wait. I ran, rain-slick cobbles, snatched at my boots. The alley stank of tallow and wet leather. Sandy Brows hauled Maisie along, muttering curses. When he heard my footfalls, he spun, yanking her close, wicked knife glinting, more threat than intent, but enough to freeze breath. "Let her go," I said, voice shaking yet somehow audible above my pounding pulse. "You gained nothing yesterday. You'll gain less today." His laugh rasped. "You cost us a river of gold, Chit. Someone's paying that debt." Bootsteps thundered behind me. Luke. Seeing the boxer's bulk fill the alley, Sandy Brows tightened his grip on the child. "One more step and the brat squeals," he hissed. Luke halted. Rain pattered on brick. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Maisie, brave scrap that she was, bit the hand that held her. Sandy Brows yelped, slackening just enough for Luke to surge forward, palm snapping the knife from his grasp. I grabbed Maisie, pulled her behind me. Within seconds, constables converged. Sandy Brows fought like a cornered ferret, but a constable's baton ended the struggle. Iron cuffs clanged. Curses echoed. The alley fell silent save Maisie's ragged breaths and my own. Luke knelt to inspect a shallow cut on Maisie's forearm where the knife had grazed. He stripped the silk lining from his coat pocket, fashioned a makeshift bandage. Bravery is contagious, he told her with a weary smile. But promises must accompany it. You'll keep to well-lit streets. She nodded, tear-stained yet proud. A pledge sealed. Back at the orphanage courtyard, dusk found us gathered by lantern light. Police wagons rumbled away, carrying Sandy Brows to join Hawk in custody. Banished threat left behind a hush, the kind that follows summer thunder. Ms. Caldwell shepherded the children indoors. Doyle departed to draft statements for magistrates. Only Luke, Aunt Clara, Maisie, Thomas, and I remained beneath the sweet pea trellis. Luke crouched to child height. You were nearly hurt because villains wanted revenge on me, he said soberly. That must never repeat. Maisie extended the felt heart he had given her earlier. You can't protect everybody alone, she declared. So we'll protect you back. You kept your promise. You fought fair. We keep ours. We stay bright. Luke swallowed, unstrapping one glove pendant from around his own neck and fastening it beside hers. Two small silver fists glimmered together. Partnership, he said, is the strongest guard. His gaze lifted to mine. That extends across counties, Miss Hart, and across mistakes, I answered. Because trust demands more than winning. It asks us to keep showing up. He touched the pendant lying against my collarbone. Then let this be our reminder. If ever fear walks beside you again, send word. Champions owe their cornermen. Managed a laugh. And cornermen need champions. Overhead, the first star pricked evening's veil. Aunt Clara ushered the children inside, leaving Luke and me in quiet lamplight. I take the early goods train tomorrow, he said. A 3-day exhibition tour. But your testimony means I can travel knowing the courtroom already tilts toward justice. Come back after, I told him. Rivergate has orchards, too. You'd like them. He nodded, emotion flickering, tender, unguarded. Then he touched the brim of his hat, turned down Briar Lane, and melted into shadows scented with budding lilac. The road home. That night I wrote by the dormer window, lamp low, pen scratching across crisp paper. Dear Father, dear. Mother, trust, like railways, must be laid mile by mile. Last week I feared every wrong turn. Tonight I see how each bend can lead to wider tracks. I have stood in a champion's corner and in a child's rescue. I learned that bravery is not the roar of crowds, but the quieter moment when we choose to keep faith with strangers. I carry home 2 silver gloves and a promise to pass courage along whenever chance allows. I signed, sealed, and addressed it. Outside, the night birds called, soft, contented notes. I answered by sliding the pendant's chain beneath my collarbone, near enough to feel the cool metal echo my heartbeat. In that steady rhythm, I heard the lesson of every mile traveled. Since Rivergate, triumph is only half victory until shared. Trust is the bridge that lets its weight cross from one heart to another. I douse the lamp and sleep, real, untroubled sleep, folded over me for the first time in what felt like years, smelling faintly of sweet peas, gingerbread, and iron rails stretching toward whatever morning might bring. Chapter 10. Journey's End. Soft autumn sunlight spilled over the slate roofs of Meadowsend Station, turning every puddle to a rectangle of burnished copper. 3 full months had passed since the night Luke Mason felled the ring wolf, since a ribbon-wrapped note dashed a gambler's plot, and since a girl who had once feared missed stations found her footing on a far wider map. The trial of Elias Hawke and his cohort had concluded the previous afternoon, the judge's gavel ringing, out a sentence as crisp as early frost. 10 years hard labor for conspiracy and attempted grievous harm. Newspapers from Kingsport to London trumpeted the verdict. My own testimony, clear-voiced in the hush of Crown Court, had been printed almost verbatim in the Courier. Aunt Clara tucked that clipping beside her pressed sweet peas, a keepsake. Of the day courage stood taller than fear. Now, at last, the calendar read Saturday, 7th October. The date inked in Father's most recent telegram. Coach meets 11 a.m. sharp. Can't wait to see our wandering star. I was homeward bound. Ticket to Rivergate. I arrived early, as ever. Suitcase in one hand, Luke's silver glove pendant resting beneath my collarbone like a secret pocket watch. The press of travelers had thinned with the season. Only a trio of university students argued over timetables by the far bench, and a shepherd loaded crates of bleating lambs into the goods van. The station clock ticked a soothing metronome while the downline locomotive hissed idle encouragement. I presented my through ticket to the porter, Rivergate via Silverwood Junction, a neat circle closed, and found a corner seat in the third-class compartment. Outside the window, Aunt Clara waved her linen handkerchief. eyes bright but unswollen by grief. This farewell carried no dread, only rightness, as though a story's final page must be turned. Just as the guard's whistle puckered his lips, a familiar figure vaulted the platform steps. Luke Mason, minus waistcoat and hat, hair ruffled by a Mersey wind and grin wide as the river itself. "Thought you'd slip away without a bodyguard?" he teased, stepping aboard. "Doyle's posting me to Manchester for an exhibition, but the first leg rides your train. May I share your carriage?" He needed no permission. The door clanged shut behind him. The engine gave its answering roar, and Meadowsend slipped backward into a watercolor blur. We sat thigh to thigh on the worn leather, the comfortable silence of comrades who have faced too much together to require small talk. After a few miles, Luke produced a slim parcel. "Found this in the orphanage workshop," he said. "Maisie stitched it for your mother." I opened the brown paper to reveal an oven mitt shaped like a boxing glove. Apple green twill, red piping, heart heroine embroidered in crooked capitals. Laughter burst from me as sudden as a lark's song. "It'll hang by the hearth," I promised, smoothing the fabric as one might stroke a child's hair. The train slipped into the long cutting beyond Applebrook, now reinforced with granite, buttresses after summer rains, and we both fell quiet, lulled by the echoes. Memories crowded the dark. Hawk's leer, the crack of rails under storm, a ribbon knotted by unfamiliar hands. Yet no shadow remained. Each recollection shone like a pane in a stained glass window, danger transmuted into color and light. When the carriage emerged, orchards rolled to the horizon, autumn's first reds and russets, branches heavy with fruit. Luke's breath hitched at the view. "I thought the press called me the orchard giant just for the alliteration," he admitted. "But here's the real giant. Miles and miles of sweet crop." He turned earnest eyes on me. "The exhibition? Tour ends next fortnight. If the Rivergate harvest could use another pair of bruised fists," I finished for him. "There's room at our table, Luke. Always." His answering smile felt like sunrise finally catching up to dawn. Silverwood. Revisited. At Silverwood Junction, we had 10 minutes to change trains, a neat echo of the mistake that began everything. I disembarked on legs steady as seasoned timber. Luke carried my case, and together we crossed the footbridge where once I had panicked at a shrinking timetable. Below, the buttercream station house looked unchanged, but Mrs. Weatherby's bookstall boasted new awning stripes and glass jars full of sugared plums. She spied me, clapped her hands, and pressed a postcard into my palm. The Silverwood Viaduct under a sunrise wash. For that scrapbook you'll write one day, she said, eyes twinkling. And a flask of spiced cider for the road, on the house for our local heroine. We had just enough time to sip the steaming drink together, cinnamon and apple, memory and promise, before the upline whistle summoned us onward. Luke tipped his cup in salute to Mrs. Weatherby. Best doping agent I'll ever allow near my gloves, he joked. Back aboard, he stowed my valise overhead and tapped the silver pendant at my throat. Keep wearing that. Boxers believe in talismans. It isn't magic, I replied. Just metal. Metal forged from trust, he countered. That's stronger than superstition. 3 last miles. First light. With Silverwood fading, my homeland unfurled, river meadows webbed with mist, reed beds whispering secrets to the wind, and finally the weather-beaten oaks that marked the outskirts of Rivergate. My heartbeat quickened. The platform came into view. Father's familiar figure, mother beside him, a small clutch of neighbors brandishing paper flags. The brakes sighed. Passengers rose, but Luke remained seated a moment longer, eyes thoughtful. Emily, he said, voice pitched low to dodge eavesdroppers. Someday your rails will run beyond orchards, beyond storm and station and even boxing rings. When that day comes, write me. A champion should repay his corner more than once. I pressed Maisie's oven-mitt parcel into his hands. And you, Luke Mason, must guard your fists the way you asked me to guard this pendant. Every match you fight funds courage in places you may never visit. The guard slid the door wide. Applause rose outside, absurd and wonderful. Luke hefted my suitcase, walked me to the threshold and whispered, "Journey's end is only mile marker to those who keep moving." Then he stepped back, saluted the crowd with a showman's flourish, and remained on board while I descended into Father's waiting arms. Homecoming Orchard. The lane toward our cottage wore an October crown, gold poplars lining the ditch, crab apples scattered like rubies on the verge. Mother insisted on driving the pony cart so I could sit high and breathe the scent of leaf smoke and cider pressings. Over every hedge came a wave or a shout. Children raced alongside until their mothers recalled chores. At the gate, the old collie bounded out, fur grayer than before but eyes bright. I knelt to scratch his ears while Mother unloaded my valise and the Rivergate newspaper waiting atop the post box. Headline, Hart Girl's Testimony Fells Gambling Ring. She tut-tutted over the hyperbole but saved the sheet all the same. Inside, familiar things glowed with a new patina. Willow pattern plates I had always taken for granted. the tick of the hall clock once mocked for being slow, Father's fiddle propped by the hearth. Each object felt like a stanza in a poem I could finally recite by heart. That evening we shared ginger scones warm from the oven, the same recipe I had once feared to eat on the train, and I told my parents everything, leaving out only those parts a mother's worry need not revisit. Father listened with eyebrows climbing like ivy. Mother dabbed at her eyes but laughed when the tale demanded. When I finished, they placed their hands over mine. "Your courage," Father said, "grew by running toward what frightened you." Mother added, "And by trusting wisely. Rare skill, that." We hung Maisie's oven mitt beside the hearth, silver glove pendant catching lamplight beside it. On the mantelpiece, the postcard from Silverwood stood upright, blank side outward, waiting for a message. Seedbeds of tomorrow. The river valley gave up its leaves to winter sooner than usual that year, but the orchard never looked barren to me again. Wherever I walked, between rows of bare cherry branches or along the ridge where trains carved their steady hymn, I felt threads connecting that quiet landscape to Kingsport's roar, to the thunder of Stormcrow Arena, to a single lamp in a guard's van where an envelope had whispered a warning. Luke kept his vow. A parcel arrived at Christmas, a well-worn pair of cotton training wraps, autographed, and a note, teaching the orphanage lads proper footwork. They insist on sending their love to their first cornerman. In spring came another. Aunt Clara's sweet pea seeds multiplied into packets, their sale now funding school books for Maisie's class. And on the first anniversary of the Ringwolf fight, a bright April day, steam spiraled above Rivergate as the mid-morning train braked. Luke stepped onto the platform, coat slung over a shoulder, orchard blossom drifting like confetti on the breeze. I met him beneath the old oak tree where I had once counted the slow minutes to a distant station. Father's fiddle and Mother's laughter rose from the yard beyond, mingling with the soft tap-tap of pruning shears in the rows. Luke inhaled orchard scent, grinned, and extended an arm as though opening a door. "Ready for the next round?" he asked. I tightened the pendant chain, a weightless promise, and answered with 3 small words that had gathered meaning over every mile of my circuitous journey. Ring the bell. And so the path that began in Sleepless Vigil found its ending only to unfold again, like track unfurling toward a horizon forever just beyond reach, a horizon where trust sparks courage, courage feeds triumph, and every triumph, shared, becomes the first step of some new, unwritten adventure. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.